Hey YouTube, here's part 2 of probably part 3 or 4 that I'm going to be making on the 2014 FZ-09. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the comments, both positive and negative. The feedback really helps me make better videos, and that's why I'm following this up with part 2, so I hope to clarify a lot of things. I saw, again, a lot of positives, but I want to try and fix some of the negatives today because I do agree with what a lot of people said. One of the things that came into question, and this is a live video by the way, I am right next to the bike, you're not looking at just a photo. Some of the things I want to go over with you guys is I made some inconsistencies in the video that weren't inconsistent to me, but I can understand why they would be misinterpreted on your end. So let's start talking about a few things. First of all, I've had this bike now since the review was made. I've put another 1,500 miles on the bike. In the last 1,500 miles, I've learned a lot about the bike. I've found some negatives that I don't like, in addition that I didn't mention. I've found some positives. So let's go over some of the basic things, and then I will go back to my comparison with the Street Triple in just a moment for further clarification. First of all, in all my videos, all my bikes, I will put 800 to 1,000 miles on the bike before I do a review, because I want to give as good and as most accurate information. Of course, all the information other than fact-based is all my opinion. So how it rides, how the brakes feel, that's just my opinion. So we may not all disagree, or we may not all agree. That being said, keep that in mind when you watch a review, is that this is going to be a lot based on my opinion and what I feel is good and not good. That being said, let's go to the first thing that I'm looking at, which is the seat. I mentioned in the video that the seat got great support, and it has nice upright feel, and it's a nice seat. I still feel the seat is good, but where the seat does lack is when you're sitting in a very say sporty position, when you're maybe riding in a canyon run. The only issue I find with the seat is that when you are cupped onto the tank, and if you notice here, I do have the tech spec snakeskin version of the pads and the center pad that I believe Stolotech, I always get the name of that company wrong, carries, and they made a batch for, but you can now, I believe, buy them direct through tech spec. They range about $45-50 for the 2 outer pads, and I think the center pad is separate, about $70 for everything, and they're a huge help. But the seat doesn't give you great support under hard acceleration. You find that even when you're gripping the tank, because of the angle that you're sitting at, in fact, let me jump on the bike and show you here. So when you look down, where I'm at now, and you see I'm wearing my shorts here, but where I'm at now, my feet come down quite a ways. When you're actually in a very strong position, if you're sitting in this area, you're going to find that you're going to continually be pushed back on the bike. It does give a little discomfort because as you're trying to be lightweight on your bars, what ends up happening is that you end up kind of creating a little head shake on your own because you're pulling on the bars a little bit. It takes a little getting used to. Very similar riding style to a Supermoto in that regard is that you don't have great seat support. So Seat Concepts does have a alternative to making a stickier and a little bit more plush seat. Other than that, the seat doesn't particularly bother me. It's not something I wouldn't buy the bike over. It's not something that's like you have to do the second you buy it. It's just something I've noticed over time that I would like a little bit more support in the seat. The other things, I still today feel, and I have a lot of experience with the Street Triple Rs, and so I have a lot of experience essentially with the 675 motor, and I still feel that this engine is far superior to that engine in regards to the overall streetability and fun factor. I just like the linear power band. That doesn't mean the Triumph engine isn't good. Let's get this clear, because everyone seems to think, well, I'm contradicting the fact that the Triumph engine isn't good and this is better. The Triumph engine is a great engine. It's just I prefer this style, this linear power band that this engine gives, where the Triumph to me gives me personally more. It's, you know, all triples have a nice linear power band, but this engine to me has a stronger pull throughout the entire RPM range, which means that I can get more out of the bike everywhere than I could on the Triumph. It's just more powerful because you have more displacement and more torque. So more torque is going to give you that feel. So that's why I prefer this engine. And I also, from experience, know that this engine thus far has given me less trouble in the amount of time that I've owned it than when I had a 675. In addition, the engine itself, the only issues that have come up, I haven't had any breakdowns or any issues, but there is one thing that this engine has done, which it has developed a cam tensioner sound, which seems to be a common issue. The cam tensioner basically gives a chatter in the engine, and it first I thought was an oil pressure related issue, but it's an issue where the cam tensioner seems to almost get stuck a little bit and then loosen up. That issue lasted about 300 miles. I did take it to the dealer in regards to that, and the issue's gone away just by riding the bike. So it is an unusual issue. I'm not sure if, I know some people on the forums have been replacing the cam tensioner, saying that solves it. Some people have had the same experience I had, but nothing to concern about because I haven't heard of anyone having a breakdown with the motor. Let me go into one of the things I hit on all my videos, which is suspension. Honestly, this is one thing I'm going to kind of take back on my last video. I said the suspension on this bike was livable and doable, and it's not that it isn't. It's just the suspension's not great for somebody who's looking for good performance. Not so much just the front end, really, it's more the rear. This rear shock is a pretty cheap piece. It doesn't offer enough adjustment, nor does the front, obviously, but this doesn't offer enough adjustment. And as I've been fine-tuning it as much as I can with what little adjustment there is. I'm fairly satisfied where it is now, but really when you go into the hard riding, you get a lot of bounce, and because of the angle of this shock, you really had to find a proprietary option for this bike, because like taking off another bike, say, I don't know, an R1, or just to give you an example, that wouldn't actually fit. But the point is, because of this shock angle and its pivot point, you would need something proprietary. Good news is now Penske, who by the way I think makes a fantastic product, offers a rear shock for this bike. 3 different versions. There's the third version basically offers the most adjustability, and you can find that online. It's not terribly cheap. I think it's a $600-700 part for the highest version of it, and that offers a remote reservoir mounted on the opposite side up here where there's a space. That's what I have on order for the bike. I think that's going to make a huge difference, because right now when you ride the bike, you'll go into a mid-corner sweeper, and as you come into the sweeper, if the rear end hits a little bump in the road or something, it completely unsettles, and you can never get the rebound and compression right, so you still get a lot of bounce, and you feel like the rear tire may completely dislodge, and you may go into a low side or even potentially a high side. So that's one thing that made me uncomfortable with the bike that I'm working on. When it comes to the front suspension, you can see I have a zip tie here so I can see how much travel I'm using on the road right now of the shock. And, I feel that with my current settings, for the road at least, it's not bad. The front is a tad soft, especially once you break it in and it settles out and you readjust it and all that. It is a tad soft. Obviously, no compression adjustment, but I don't find nearly as big an issue with the front as I do with the rear. But I think there are options for the front and the rear right now, and I think that there's going to be even more. So it's not an issue that would stop me from buying this bike. In fact, I can tell you factually, in my opinion, the rear shock on the Street Triple is really not that much better. Yes, it does offer more adjustment. You can get more out of it, but the rear shock on the Street Triple is the only thing that lacks. The front end doesn't on the Street Triple. There's definitely good adjustment there. But that being said, I'm still on the factory tires. They're Dunlops, and let me give you the exact model, but point I'm trying to make with them is, they are the Dunlop, where is it here? Come on. The Sportmax D214s. It is obviously more of a street commuting compound. I don't know if you can, let me go on the sun side here. I don't know if you can see, getting decent wear on the tire. It's not lobbing out at all, but then again, I also use it mostly in the twisties, so I don't expect that. But the tire seems to actually work really well, and it gets up to temp really quick, which I like. So if you buy this bike and it has this tire on it, honestly, unless you're going to the track, which I doubt most of you guys are going to do with it, I would just keep this tire. It is a great tire. It works well in the wet, works well in the dry, and when you get it up to temp, which it does relatively quickly, you'll have a lot of confidence in it in the canyons and twisties. It has pretty good response, and it I have a lot of feel with it, so I like the tire. Obviously, if I was to replace the tire, I would probably consider something like the Q3. In fact, that's exactly what I would go with on this bike. Would be a good alternative, but I would have to do front and rear. Moving forward to the bike, the one other thing the guys are asking about is fuel tank capacity being less than the Street Triple R and other naked commuter style bikes, and I haven't found there to be any issue. What I can tell you is that when the screen reads that you're empty and starts to blink at you, you have almost a whole gallon left, so quite a bit of fuel left, but it's a good range, averaging about 150 to 160, maybe 170 miles, depending on how I'm riding, on a tank of fuel. If I'm going really hard, that, however, it'll do 120. So, the fuel economy, it does vary quite a bit. Other than that, on the California model of the bike, which has the charcoal canister and all that, some of you guys, if you're having this bike and you're experiencing where the bike may take some trouble starting, first key thing is make sure as I explained in the initial video, your ignition switch has two positions: off, on, and then to start it. I generally leave mine instead of off in this second position so that I turn the bike on and off with the key majority of the time. And what happens is, and you can't hear it because obviously I'm using the microphone in my helmet, but the fuel pump will prime immediately. So when you turn the key, let the key settle for 3-4 seconds, even 5 seconds, put your gloves on, do whatever, then start the bike by pushing it forward. I haven't had an issue since I've been doing that. Ideally, you'd want to remove the charcoal canister, but I can't suggest on video that you do anything outside of California law. But that's something that I know would resolve the issue. I only run 91 or better fuel, so some guys have asked me, does it run on 87? In my opinion, bikes use so little fuel, I don't see the point of saving a couple cents per gallon when I can run 91, and California 91 sucks to begin with, so I wouldn't even consider running anything below that. Brakes, I have no trouble with the brakes. It doesn't have braided lines. It doesn't have any issues. The one thing I will tell you is from Yamaha, the brakes were not bled properly. One thing you might want to consider doing is pull in your brake, not too much. Take a zip tie it to your grip overnight. What that's going to do is it's going to bring any air that's in the lines, and it's going to bring it up to this reservoir. So you're going to want to unscrew these two bolts, pull this off, leave it open, but leave it sitting on so you don't get any debris in there. And what that will do is it should bleed any residual air up into the reservoir and out of the system. I did that, and I did get a much better brake feel. Of course, with you don't have braided lines, you don't have a very a very high-end brake lever system here, and your piston isn't anything worth mentioning, but to me, I haven't had any trouble, and I actually really haven't had any fade on the brakes, even through some really tight canyon stuff. So I can't complain about the brakes on the bike once I did that, and it feels really good. Stopping power is excellent, especially on the rear. Actually, most of my bikes, especially some of the newer Ducatis, the rear brake really doesn't work very well, but the rear brake on this bike's really responsive, and it has good communication. So you really can feel the amount of tension and pressure you're applying on the rear brake on this bike really well. So I really like that. Other things to note on the bike that I would probably look at, obviously I run Motul oil on my bikes, 300V 4T, specific to motorcycles. Keep in mind there's different 300V Motuls. You don't want to run the one for cars because it doesn't have the friction modifier that's designed to run with wet clutches, which is what this bike has. So this bike's clutch is bathed in the same oil that runs throughout the entire engine. So you want to make sure you get the right oil. The reason I note that is because my running temperatures dropped about 4 to 5 degrees with the Motul. Most of my bikes drop much more than that, surprisingly. This bike ran cool to begin with, so it didn't make as big a difference by doing that, but definitely get rid of that factory oil that's not, as most factory oils aren't too great. Other things to note on, I think now I'm going to start revisiting my comparison with the Street Triple R. So first of all, I have a lot of experience on both bikes, so when I'm talking about this, again, strictly my opinion. So let me give you a quick summary version of what I think between the two bikes. If you want to get a bike and your main goal is to get performance out of the box, meaning good suspension, good power, good engine, with the ability to do almost nothing to the bike, go with the Triumph. Reason I say that is because the suspension on this bike does need work, and you're not going to be able to get as much out of it as you could on the Triumph. That's just the fact. The only thing I feel personally on the Street Triple R, however, is that the rear shock is the only item that truly lacks on it. I think the bike is almost, as far as a package, is almost pretty perfect, minus the rear shock, which I think is not great. And so that's that. When it comes to engines, again, I made some clarification at the beginning of this video, and I'll clear it up again. The Triumph obviously is down almost 200 cc from this bike. The displacement on this bike is going to give you more torque. By giving you the additional torque, for somebody who's looking on a commuting end, that additional torque is going to communicate to you that you're not going to have to run the bike as high up in the revs to get the same speed and communication and movement from the bike that you would in the 675. The 675 inherently is more of an engine that wants to be revved out more, and also requires you in a way to rev it out more to get more out of it. The 675 is a higher revving engine, so you're going to have higher wear. This engine is a fairly low revving engine, I find, for its size, and so that's another reason why I like this engine, is that I like that torque. And because of for me, this bike, I look at it as a bike where when I don't want to ride my sport bikes and I want to go and just, kind of explore or commute or just do a weekend cruise run, something like that, this bike's going to be really fun. Now, keep in mind, the bikes aren't directly comparable, and I agree with some guys. Why does everyone compare this to the Street Triple R just because they have triples? And look, I think guys looking for triples, I think this is a fair comparison. I know for me, I do try to compare them to each other, but in theory, they're really different bikes. This bike's got a very upright seating position in comparison. Your bars are very tall. You're in a very comfortable position, and you're trying to put your weight over the tank. The issue is because your bar height, when you're trying to put that weight over the front end, obviously keeping your bars loose, but when you're trying to put the weight over the front end by moving your body forward, it's difficult because of the height of the bars. Where on the Street Triple, instead of the bar being here, the bar is probably down here. So you're able to move a lot more forward on the bike than you are here. That being said, that doesn't mean that you can't go and do the same things. It's just what style you're looking for. So I'm trying to clarify as much of that as possible. As far as power goes, this bike is more powerful. It's faster. I have raced one on a drag strip from a roll. I don't drag. I don't do those 0 to 60s, but I wanted to get an idea how much faster it is in comparison to the 675. It isn't drastic, but this bike is faster. If that means anything to you, I think the key here is going to be what kind of style you're going for and what you want to do with it. I think once this bike has the rear shock, and by the way, this is where that would mount, the reservoir would mount, would be right here. Once you do the rear shock, and they have a couple drop-in kits, cartridge kits for the front forks, I really think that once you have the suspension up to par with each other is going to be the real test to see which one you like better. Other than that, honestly, go test ride them and see which one you like. The fact is, for me, having had both, my personal opinion is I prefer the Yamaha, given the suspension flaws on the bike. One more thing I want to touch base on is the snatchy throttle and things everyone talked about. I personally haven't had any struggle with this bike and haven't had any snatchy throttles. That being said, I did have a chance to ride one of my followers' bikes the other day. It was in the orange color, and I rode his bike. He had about 700-800 miles on it, and I did notice that his throttle was inherently snatchy, and I didn't know why there was such a difference between our two bikes. So, Currently, Flash Tune, which is in Orange County, or well, the city is actually Orange, but in the Orange County area in California, has now released a ECU flash for this bike that costs, I think, around $100 or $200. It's very inexpensive. You just pull the ECU, which is under the tank, you send it to them, and they reflash it. That will be done to this bike on Friday for further review. And what will be happening is basically it's going to take your deceleration out. These bikes with the emissions setup currently have decel cut down to 4,500 RPM, meaning when you rev up to redline and then let go for decel, your injectors are actually off, and that's why your deceleration on the bike isn't as good. So they turn that on, or off I should say, I don't know how, whatever you call it, so your deceleration's highly improved. It also takes out the snatchy throttle that some guys may be experiencing. I don't know why my bike does not have that issue, but that should improve that. It can also make it so that when you start the bike, it'll either start in A mode or standard mode, whichever you choose. You tell them what you want, and that's something I'll review further. But there are alternatives, and reason I'm mentioning all this is because a lot of people are getting caught up with these small negatives. Keep in mind that you're going to save between this and the Street Triple R right off the bat about $2,000. That $2,000, you're going to spend about $1,000 total between your rear shock and getting your ECU flashed and a couple little extra things. If you want to do the front cartridge kit, you're going to spend about another $800 for that. I think once you spend the difference, say you took the difference of the $2,000, you put it into this bike, I do believe this bike is going to be in a way better as an overall package than the Street Triple R. In comparison to the regular Street Triple, I personally don't have much experience on it, so I can't comment on it as much. I've ridden the regular one. I personally think it lacks in a lot of ways, but I'm not going to get into that because, again, I don't have enough time on it to give a specific of enough reason for that. The only other things on this bike that I can note that are still very good, headlight for night commuting is an excellent headlight. The light beam and the reflector beam on it is great. The only thing I do not like is that when you're running the high beam on the bike, you lose your entire low beam. Because it's a dual filament bulb, for whatever reason, both filaments on, when you have the high beam only selected, shuts off. So it shoots a really high beam out of the bike, but your low beam is not good. So your close visibility is lost when you're trying to gain your high visibility. So if you use your flasher, however, it keeps both on. So it's kind of an unusual thing. I haven't figured that out, but I don't, it doesn't bother me, I guess, too much. Other than that, no other issues with the bike. I hope this offers some clarification on both. I'm going to continue making videos on this bike, especially once I start doing some of the modifications, including the suspension and the ECU. And again, post any questions on there. I try to do my best to answer everyone, and I appreciate all the positive feedback, and I hope that to those who gave me the negative feedback, this kind of clarifies my position on things and where I'm coming from on the bike. And again, any questions, I'm happy to come out every weekend and try and make another video to answer these things. I'm working on a bunch of videos right now and a couple other different reviews for you guys, so subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to posting more stuff and hearing from you guys. Alright, take care.